You can watch these pretty faces all night. Thank you. We appreciate that. Both handsome gentlemen, at least. So I guess kind of going back to what we were talking about is we have a pretty interesting matchup here. Kind of like as Bondo was saying, kind of old 2013 matchup of Delver versus Show and Tell, which is, really traditional matchup for a while. Though one of the more interesting things here is Dickmnann has decided to play Omniscience. So that means he's going to have a Cunning Wish package. He's going to have a little more interesting options post-sideboard. Brett, on the other hand, he's playing Grixis Delver, kind of stock, except he does have a little bit of an interesting card. He does have 4 Stifles in his main deck.
Yeah, and what we're seeing here is Brett is on the play because he was he finished best in he finished second in his group, and Patrick finished third in his group. So Brett is on the play, and he has Deathrite Shaman, 2 Deathrite Shamans, a Ponder, Brainstorm, Daze, and a Gurmag Angler, and 1 Misty Rainforest. Right. So I would probably think that Brett is going to keep this one because he has the double Deathrite Shaman, and Patrick probably won't force a will like the first the first Deathrite Shaman, because it doesn't really do that much against his plan. But on the other hand, Patrick has a kind of interesting hand here.
Yeah, this is a hand where I think in general you're going to mulligan. Double Ancient Tomb, is pretty bad as it is. But for example, if the intuition in his hand was Show and Tell, for example, then Patrick might be a little more tempted to kind of keep this hand because with Show and Tell and Ponder. Yeah. And Preordain, just 1 blue source can kind of fix everything that's going on here. So we're likely to see him mulligan, which is kind of what we also saw happen to him a lot during our pod plays. Just ended up mulliganing a lot. But fortunately, the deck is very consistent. 4 Ponder, 4 Brainstorm, an Intuition, an Impulse, a couple Preordains. So the deck is a lot more consistent than it used to be here. So he's going to mulligan to 6. He's going to scry. We're going to see Brett lead off with a fetch for an Underground Sea and a Deathrite Shaman, and pass it right back.
Yeah, and interesting, Brett has the Daze, and last time we saw Brett, he was really conservative with his Daze, so it's going to be interesting to see where he's going to fire it off in this matchup. So Patrick is on the Ponder here, and he could actually just Daze right away, because he knows that Patrick already, he already mulliganed. But Patrick actually didn't play the Ponder because he's afraid of Daze, probably.
Yeah, it looks like he is going to be playing around Daze and passing here, but it's also his only blue card for Force of Will. And although there isn't too much that he's scared of at this moment, it is possible that a young Pyromancer can go way out of control. We're going to see a pass back here to Brett, though. Brett's going to go ahead and cast the Ponder in his hand and see Stifle, Underground Sea, and Volcanic Island. And I'm not really thrilled with this. I wouldn't be surprised to see Brett shuffle. Stifle's fine, but it's not going to be really good. But I think mostly we're likely to see him shuffle and try and hit a brand new card.
Yeah.
We'll see in just a moment what his choice ended up being. But the real question here is, what is the card? If you're Brett, what is the card that you're looking for? What is the card that you absolutely want to draw?
I think having a fetch land in the graveyard, I think he kind of wants a land and probably a fetch land, but he will go for a Force of Will as well. But having a fetch land with a Brainstorm in his hand is pretty good. And because Patrick played around nicely around the Daze, he didn't get to just replay his Underground Sea. So I think this is pretty good that Brett gets to develop his board. And he's not shuffling with the Skellington here because he has the Brainstorm, and he knows that Dismember is not really that good against Show and Tell. So actually, it's kind of a blank, so it's a mulligan. So he wants to do the Brainstorm next turn and then shuffle the Dismember away.
Yeah, and so we're going to see here Patrick is going to go ahead, draw Brainstorm for the turn, and that's going to be pretty reasonable at helping him fix his hand. But he's going to go ahead and lead off with Ponder because really he's looking for a very specific card here, and he's looking for a creature to pair with his Sneak Attack, or he's looking for a Show and Tell, or we're looking for just a little more consistency here. And we're going to see a Force of Will, Impulse, and Scalding Tarn off of this Ponder, and I got to say, this is not really exciting. Impulse is okay, and Fetch Land means your life is going to be a little bit easier, but because they know what their deck lists are going to be, there's a good chance that Patrick just has to respect Stifle here out of Brett and not be able to shuffle away the garbage.
Yeah, I can see Patrick keeping this and shuffling it away, depending on like what he wants to do in the game. Because having the impulse is pretty good. Having like the force of will is pretty good, and you can get to shuffle it away. Because he really wants to get rid of one of the lands in his hand, so he's probably going to brainstorm and then shuffle. So having like double could definitely be a thing. But he decides to shuffle here, which is perfectly reasonable. He got a Lotus Petal off the draw from the Ponder, which is pretty good for him to play around Daze here. Patrick obviously doesn't know that he has Daze, that Brett has Daze, but it's pretty good like when he wants to go off to cast a Lotus Petal and just be able to pay for Daze.
All right, and Brett's going to go ahead and draw Young Pyromancer here. Young Pyromancer is going to be really good for Brett to kind of get going here. Unfortunately, he doesn't. There aren't a lot of lands in the graveyard to kind of fuel some of the more crazier turns with Deathrite Shaman here. So we're going to see Brett lead off with a Brainstorm, kind of maybe get rid of some of the chaff in his hand. The Dismember, for example, definitely needs to go.
Yeah, the fun thing here is that Brett doesn't play Young Pyromancer pre-brainstorming to get the extra token, because I think he wants to be a more control-ish before he really turns on the tempo to start aggressing Patrick. So he really wants to build up a counter base in his hand before he starts to become aggressive. And it's the same Brett as we saw in the like the prequels, that he's really conservative. He knows his pace in the game. He knows when to be aggressive, and it's really a delight to see.
Yeah, what's actually really interesting here is there's a really good chance that what Brett is looking for is he's looking for more protection. He's looking for a Cabal Therapy or a Force Will. I don't think he has Therapy in his deck. He doesn't. So he's just looking for a Force Will right here, because he's at the point where he's realized that Patrick has all the ability right now to play around Daze. And since that's his only protection, he really wants to find a Force of Will. You know, Patrick, if he has a Force of Will in his hand and is able to play around Daze, he's going to jam. And I think Brett's realized that, and he's just going to go ahead and try and find some piece here. So we will see. We will see how he's going to go ahead and deal with this turn. We saw the Angler. That's going to go ahead and stay in his hand. Dismember's gone. And the real question is Brett going to go ahead and play this Young Pyromancer and use this Ponder to get a token and try to find a Force of Will? Or is he just going to cast this Ponder and, kind of try and just set up?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, because I think he can both, if he plays the Wasteland, he can kind of like try and, he doesn't really need the resources from Wasteland, so he can try and kill the Scowling Tarn, or he can just play the Young Pyromancer and play the Ponder and then say, I have Stifle, so try and fetch. And I think that's why he taps the Wasteland here, is to try and keep open for either Spell Pierce, or he doesn't have Spell Pierce, but for a Stifle for the Scowling Tarn. So Patrick is gonna be, he will probably be scared. And as we see here, he actually gets Stifle Dismember. So let's see if he keeps Stifle. It would be weird if he didn't. But
I think it is pretty likely that we are going to see it here, because Brett can't actually. I don't think there's any yards in the yard, so this Deathrite is actually just kind of sitting around. But Patrick does kind of have to respect with this fetch lane in play, because with the activation on the stack, Brett can actually exile the Scalding Tarn to stifle it.
Yeah, it's kind of brutal. Let's see. I don't think he's gonna fetch before he brainstorms, but nevertheless, it's gonna be brutal for Patrick. This is what the Tempo deck does. It's really like getting these small threats out, then use these.
Yeah, honestly, I would be pretty interested to see how Patrick handles this turn. There is the possibility that with Force Will in hand and the ability to play around Daze, we might see a City of Traders Lotus Petal fetch for a red source and cast Sneak Attack. But I don't think he has and he does have a basic Mountain too. So Patrick can actually also play around the Wasteland that's in play as well. But we're going to see him go ahead and lead off with a Brainstorm here. Go ahead and get 3 new cards in hand. Spell Pierce, Force of Will, 2 of the cards that are joining the fray.
The thing is, with the Stifle in Brett's hand, he can actually kind of Brainstorm lock Patrick in this situation. And people who don't know what Brainstorm locking is, if you keep a hand with Brainstorm and you Brainstorm like in the first turn to get your second land or get like actually spells, and you see nothing and you have no ways of shuffling, then you know what the next 2 draw steps are. And right now, when Brett is going to stifle the Scalding Tarn, Patrick knows that the next 2 draw steps are nothing. And then Brett eventually will have enough on the board to actually kill him. So this turn is going to be interesting to see if Patrick goes for the Scalding Tarn shuffle.
Yeah, what's actually kind of interesting here is Brett's deciding to play it safe. A possibility that he has here is to cast Daze on the Brainstorm, and then Patrick has to make the decision of if he's going to fetch and if he's willing to if he's willing to fetch to play into a Stifle or not. And Brett has the ability to just kind of stifle away the Scalding Tarn and be able to get the Daze and set Patrick back pretty far. This is kind of, one of those more interesting things is, do you play your land before so you can play around Daze, or do you wait so your Brainstorm's a little bit better here? And, it ended up not working out, bad for anyone, but Patrick does have the ability here to, he's going to play an island, play a Lotus Petal. Looks like he's going to fetch here for a mountain here, and Brett's going to try to go ahead and stifle him here, and I would be pretty surprised to not see this get Spell Pierced.
Yeah, it's pretty nice that Patrick got the Spell Pierce out of the... So now it's actually like a really close game again, because even though it looks like Brett is ahead with the Daze and like the pressure on the board, Patrick has no legal targets for Wasteland. He has the ability to cast Sneak Attack and activate it so he can get in Griselbrand into play next turn if he draws a blue source. And I think he put a blue source on the top, right? No, he actually got to shuffle.
It actually shuffled, but
yeah, he got to shuffle. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, what's pretty fortunate here for Brett is he actually has Stifle. So even if he does, end up dazing this Sneak Attack and then stifling the first activation, that might give him some time, but it's not going to give him too much. That's for sure. We're pretty likely to see the Stifle not used to counter a Sneak Attack activation, but probably the first draw 7 off of the Griselbrand.
Yeah. Watching both players play like a couple of weeks ago, they're definitely in touch with the deck. They know what the decks are capable of, and they know what the matchups are. So I don't think that Brett is gonna stifle the activation of the Sneak Attack, as you're saying. He will probably go for the Griselbrand.
It's pretty likely here, or it's also possible that if Patrick has Emrakul here, then you can stifle the Annihilator trigger too, which would obviously leave him alive here. But it pretty interestingly enough, okay, for a second I was concerned that Brett was going to attack with all of his creatures, but it seems here that it was just the simplest of click attack all, unclick my one creature. Let's go ahead and get in here for 5 and drop Patrick down to 14. With this Deathrite Shaman in play, that basically leaves Patrick at 12, and on kind of like this 2-turn clock.
Yeah, but let's see what's... I think Patrick is going to go for it here because he can't really afford to wait. And I think he's just going to try and jam out the Sneak Attack.
Yeah, I think waiting around, obviously since you're on a 2-turn clock, you need to be able to apply pressure to your opponent. You need to be able to put something into play, and it looks like the Sneak Attack is going to resolve. And, as we obviously know, Patrick's pretty happy he doesn't have to use his Force Will here, but we'll see what his plans are, and I wouldn't be surprised to see an activation of Sneak Attack here. It's possible that Patrick might want to pass to try and, ambush, young Pyromancer to eat it, gain 7, draw a bunch of cards and be really far ahead. But it's also possible that he might just try and go for a kill here.
But I actually think he's going to wait. I think he's going to wait here. Just say go, let Brett untap, let Brett attack, and then sneak in the Griselbrand to actually get the life gain. I don't think he's in a hurry here, Patrick, because he's not dead. He's not necessarily dead this turn.
Although this is actually going to be really interesting here because Brett actually has Dismember on top of his deck. So not only can he stifle, not only does he get to stifle this Sneak Attack activation, Patrick can go ahead and try and force it. Then Brett can actually dismember the Griselbrand to try and force a trade with young Pyromancer here, and kind of leave Patrick hoping that the top 7 of his deck is going to be pretty good here.
Yeah, it's kind of nice that it's only gonna gain him 2 life, Patrick. But he's gonna go for it here, Red. He's gonna attack. I like Patrick being in the more control-ish part of the matchup here and try to sneak like the young Pyromancer, because it seems like Patrick wants to go long in this game. He wants to finish the game next turn or in a couple of turns. Unfortunately, Brett's mulligan with Dismember in the beginning, it turns out to be insane right now.
It turns out to get its use in this kind of game one. So it is pretty interesting to see here. And the question is Brett going to sniff out this Griselbrand? And does it really matter? And those are the two questions that he has to figure out. Does he care if he gets it or not? And it looks like he's not going to. You need to keep pressure on your opponent. You need to try and get this game over with. The longer you wait, the worse it's going to be, especially with the hand. The hand that's fleshed out the way that it has for Brett. So he's going to go ahead and attack for 5 here and force Patrick's hand.
The thing is here, depending on how greedy Brett is with his mana, he can actually put himself lethal to a drawn Emrakul. So depending on how he wants to use the Underground Sea, the Volcanic, to actually pay for Dismember, or if he's just going to go to 14.
Right.
So that's... But I guess no, he doesn't have green, so he can't even...
Can't even get life. No.
Yeah.
And also, Patrick's not even at a low enough life total that he could dismember his own creature that Griselbrand would block.
Yeah.
So it looks like things are just going to kind of work out the way that we thought they were going to. An attack for 5, a sneak attack in Griselbrand. Force of Will is likely to go after this Stifle on the activation, and then this Dismember is going to go ahead and force a trade here between all these things. And what's actually really interesting here is Griselbrand can draw 7, but it is kind of close that if Patrick was actually at 2 less life, he wouldn't actually be able to draw 7 because he would just be dead on board to the damage plus death right activation.
Yeah. It's kind of funny here that Brett didn't even want to fight for the activation.
Yeah, what is possible is that if he sniffed out that Patrick has on Griselbrand and not on Emrakul, then this Dismember will eat Griselbrand, and he can save Stifle for the next activation.
And I'm pretty sure that Brett didn't... if Patrick had the Emrakul, he would definitely gone for it last turn. I almost can't see a scenario where you want to just put it in to kill a young Pyromancer when it actually kills 6 permanents. That's being too conservative for Stifle, and I don't think Patrick would have done that. But the fun thing here is that actually... He's going to try to Stifle. Then, if I were Patrick, I would draw 7 in response. And then I think Brett will Stifle the Griselbrand, or he will Daze. No, what will he do? He will Stifle the Griselbrand, and then Patrick will Force. So I think that's how it's going to work out.
That's likely how things are going to go out. The other thing to consider is... this is also kind of scary too. If Brett has Lightning Bolt in hand, this draw 7 is going to be pretty bad. Because you try to draw 7, you get bolted and killed with Deathrite Shaman. But we are going to see. Oh, interestingly enough, Dismember is targeting young Pyromancer.
Okay.
All right, that's kind of interesting. We are going to see a Force of Will. It looked like we were going to see a Force of Will from Patrick on this Dismember, but he has to figure out if that's what he wants to do. And I see him hemming and hawing about it, but I think in this case it might be for the best. It's also possible that before this, I think it's actually right to draw 7 first, because if Brett does have Stifle here, he is going to Stifle the draw 7, and you want to make sure you can force that, draw your 7, force the Dismember, or something along those lines. But it looks like he's just going to go ahead and Force of Will this Dismember here to try and just gain 7.
But this is actually pretty... I like how both players are trying to next level each other. Brett, you talked about that he could kill his own creature, and it is definitely a path, because it puts Patrick dead next turn, and he knows that Patrick doesn't have Emrakul in his hand.
Right, and this is also this is definitely a pretty interesting path that both players can take.
Yeah, but now I'm pretty sure Patrick's going to draw 7 here. because he has nothing and he doesn't know what's on top of his deck. And then Brett will stifle, and then it's pretty much game next turn, depending on what Patrick draws. If he draws another Griselbrand, it would be pretty decent.
This is actually kind of interesting here. Brett is thinking about casting Gurmag Angler here, which would leave his Deathrite Shaman open and leave Patrick the ability to draw 14 cards. So I'm pretty interested to see if that's the line that he has to take.
He didn't.
I don't think he can afford to do that because he knows he doesn't have the ability to fight through it here. So we're going to go to the end step. Griselbrand is going to go away. Patrick is going to try to draw 7 cards here. He is going to get stifled, and that's going to be it. Griselbrand is not going to draw any cards, and it's going to go ahead and hit the bin here.
That was a Lightning Bolt 2.0.
And we see here that Patrick has to draw exactly, I believe, an Emrakul here. Griselbrand would be okay, although it wouldn't be great. I think you're really looking for Emrakul here. Cunning with show and tell, not going to do it off this ponder. We're very likely to see Patrick shuffle here.
Yeah. He does. No, he doesn't have anything in sideboard. So he's going to shuffle and just hope for the best. I think it's interesting that Brett, he keeps himself open to dying to Emrakul. He must have thought about, should I pay for the dismember or what should I do?
Yeah, I think he definitely thought about it, but I think at the end, he just doesn't really have a choice. It's either, hope Patrick doesn't have it so you can just try and kill him, and I think that's the way this game is playing out.
All right. So we have an additional draw step. So let's see. 3 additional cards.
Right.
Oh, good cards, but not for...
Yeah, not in this situation. We're going to go ahead bottom
up.
Another show and tell. And that's going to wrap it up for game number 1. Brett is going to go ahead and take the often harder match for Delver to win, for the often harder game for Delver to win, especially with all the dead game 1 cards. So we're going to go ahead and see how these players are boarding. If you're playing this Omnisneak, Bonde, what are you looking to board in?
I think Patrick is going to board in things that counter Brett's, because having this base of the sneak omni what's it called, base, you don't really have that much of a wiggle room to board out because you already play this control list package and a combo finish. So it's actually, you can't really board that many cards. But Patrick knows that Brett is going to board in all his discards and all his counterspells and board out all the cards that worthless. So he's probably going to board in defensive grid and maybe Coastal X return. So some sort of removal for Brett's pressure and also something to deal with either the disruption in the form of discard or counterspells. Yeah. So let's see what he's gonna do here, and also how Brett is gonna.
Yeah. What's actually also pretty interesting is this kind of sub game that Dickmnann can play, because he has the card. This is kind of interesting, right? How all of the Delver decks, especially the Grix Delver deck, is kind of morphed in such a way that Blood Moon is not as devastating as it used to be. Well, what's kind of interesting here is that Blood Moon is actually still kind of good against the deck, especially if you can get it down before Young Pyromancer or a bunch of draw spells. So there's a chance that you could just cut Brett out immediately. So I'd be pretty interested to see if Blood Moon is a card that he might be looking into. For Brett's side, we're going to see Flusterstorm, 2 of those. Surgical Extraction, 3 of those. Cabal Therapy, 3 of those. And I also wouldn't be surprised to see the Pithing Needle come in. Sneak Attack, Griselbrand are going to be really good names on Brett's side here, because the draw 7 is obviously pretty important, and needling a Sneak Attack means that there is a lot less ways that Patrick can win. And for that reason, we also might see him board in a card like Wipe Away, knowing that Brett has access to a card like Pithing Needle. But it looked like he didn't end up doing that. So we're going to go ahead and get on in here for game number 2. And we're going to see Patrick on the play here with a hand of Double Omniscience, Brainstorm, Spell Pierce, and 3 lands. This is kind of an interesting one for sure. I'm not thrilled with this kind of hand, that's for sure.
No, but the thing is, he has both Spell Pierce and Brainstorm, and he has one of his combo pieces that Patrick can't really interact with. The thing is that Brett has Surgical Extraction, Force of Will, double Cabal Therapy, and 3 lands. So even though he doesn't have creatures, he can fire off the first Cabal and say like Force of Will to keep the like the road clear, and then he can see the hand, and then eventually he'll take away like Omniscience if Patrick doesn't counter.
Yeah, this is definitely like an interesting hand on Brett's side. Double Cabal Therapy, Surgical with a ton of blue cards in your deck, making your Force Will really live, means that there's a chance that that Brett could just kind of tear apart what Patrick is going to do and shut him out of some of his ways to win.
Definitely. And as soon as Brett draws the first creature, he'll just start picking off which ever card is still left in the known hand of Patrick's hand. The funny thing is that when you have Brainstorm, you can kind of like, there is a dance when you Cabal Therapy, and the opponent has a Brainstorm that you can put cards on top, so you have to like re-guess. But usually people just name the same because those are the cards that you're casting the Cabal Therapy for anyways.
Yeah, what's really interesting here is Brett drew the perfect card. He drew a Daze here, and now Patrick has to be in this weird scenario: is does he want to let this Cabal Therapy resolve and see if Brett can blind name anything, or does he want to try and fight on the stack against this card here? And it looks like he let it resolve. Cabal Therapy named Show and Tell, which I think is a pretty good name. I think Brainstorm is another really good name, and it looks like this Cabal Therapy is going to miss. He's going to see Patrick's hand here. And he's just going to go ahead and pass it off. And I actually really like what Patrick did, and I think a lot of people don't do this enough and against Stifle decks. And Patrick played a Scalding Tarn, fetched for an island, and passed. And that was a good play, good heads-up play to play around any potential Stifle because, Brett can kind of take this control role where he's just like, all right, land go, creature go, land go, and, force Patrick's hand here. And we're pretty likely to see him fetch again here on his turn, just continually play around Stifle. Although because he has Brainstorm in his hand, he might want to go ahead and fire that off first. We'll see how Patrick is going to go ahead and take his turn.
Yeah, he definitely wants to put away one of the Omniscience when Brett has double or the second Cabal Therapy in his hand. Right,
and especially since he just saw his entire hand.
Yeah, and he's probably also gonna put away a Griselbrand here or the Ancient Tomb. A fun thing here is that Brett boarded out 2 Stifles. So Brett also knows that Patrick is on the play this turn or this game. So he knows that Patrick has the opportunity to play around these Stifles. So it was a pretty smart decision by Brett to board out these Stifles. And also by Patrick to not play into the potential Stifles.
Right. Without knowing how your opponent's sideboarding exactly, it's pretty smart to go ahead and try and play around what you can here. Gataxian Probe off the top is going to go ahead and reveal Patrick's new hand here, and this second Cabal Therapy is gonna get something here. Pretty unfortunate at this point, but I think it's likely to get Blood Moon. Without any creatures or pressure in play, Brett is really unable to mount any offensive unless he draws a Pyromancer, and trying to hold on to Force of Will Surgical as your only way to fight through is not where Brett wants to be.
But the thing is here that Brett is actually in trouble. Like, even though if he casts Cabal Therapy, Patrick will just like try and play the Blood Moon. So if he casts Cabal Therapy, Patrick will Spell Pierce the Cabal Therapy, and Brett has to use either Force of Will or Daze, or he has to wait until Patrick tries to play Blood Moon. So, he drew another Ejection Probe. So he's going to play it here, and Patrick has to, no, he can't really Spell Pierce because he used the mana. So Brett is probably just going to take the Blood Moon here.
Yeah, I think it's better for Patrick to kind of hold his Spell Pierce, wait, a little bit on that. But, it's possible that he wants to try and start eating away counters from Brett's hand. He doesn't know what Brett has. And, if he only has Force of Will or Flusterstorm here, he kind of has to run that out here. And it looks like he is going to go ahead and Spell Pierce. It is going to get dazed. This is going to get countered. Brett is going to go ahead and rip a card out of his hand.
But this is so smart of Patrick. As one is saying in the, Mo Fun, is saying in the chat that he can just daze the Blood Moon when he plays when Patrick tries to play it. By spell piercing here, Patrick takes away a potential daze in Brett's hand, and now it's only an additional daze or a Force of Will that could counter the Blood Moon. But Patrick doesn't know what Brett has, so maybe he could just have like gotten the Blood Moon on the board, and it would be pretty much game over for Brett. So it was a kind of nice sub game within the game, fighting over this Blood Moon, I think.
Right. I do. As I said, I do kind of like that. Brett has to counter the Spell Pierce because he's kind of weak to Blood Moon there.
Yeah.
But doesn't want to like get blown out by Patrick drawing some counter spell. But it looks like he's just going to go ahead and play Volcanic Island and pass. A daze off the top here is just going to kind of continue. The string of draws that Brett kind of needs to make sure that Patrick doesn't just overwhelm him or kind of shove something through.
Yeah. So Brett, as we're talking about, Brett is just 100% control. He hasn't drawn any creatures. He has 2 counterspells. He has Detection Probe till when he draws a creature, he can flashback the Cable Therapy in the graveyard. And he has Surgical Extraction if he gets to snipe either Show and Tell or Griselbrand, or like Omniscience for that sake.
So Patrick is going to see a Show and Tell off this Impulse. He's going to go ahead and add that to his hand here, but he's definitely looking for more protection here from this Force Will.
Yeah, this is one of the reasons I don't play these kind of decks. I'm just too scared of going for it.
What's really interesting here is Brett actually is going to just fire off this Surgical Extraction on Blood Moon. He doesn't want to, he doesn't really want to fight a counter war over Blood Moon just to lose to Show and Tell.
Yeah, this is smart by Brett because he also gets perfect information of Patrick's hand. And he's doing it in the draw step so that if Patrick actually drew the Blood Moon or got it out of Impulse, he will get it or get like the 3 copies the 2 additional copies that he could potentially have in his hand.
Right. What is also really good here is he also gets to see how Patrick sideboarded, and this is going to be really important. If Brett for some reason loses this game, it's really important to have an idea what your opponent's thinking of because it can help you fix your sideboarding post board. How they play and such is definitely important here. Wasteland off the top. Pretty likely just to kind of see this fired off on this Volcanic Island, depending on how things go. But, he's really looking for a creature here.
Yeah. The thing is, if you stall too many turns against the Omnisneak, you can have X amount of counterspells or disruption, but eventually they'll just play out of the top of their deck because they have additional or enough mana to just play whatever they get. So every single Show and Tell from this point will be potentially lethal for Brett. So he has to find a creature and finish the job.
Yeah, and Patrick here just wants to draw any blue card. Wow, that's actually a good one too. He draws another Show and Tell. Doesn't really matter. He's going to go ahead and jam this Show and Tell and this Force of Will down Brett's throat and try and put this Griselbrand into play.
And then it's not 100% game over, but it's very close. And Brett was very unfortunate. It's the dance that you do when you play these tempo decks and board into super control. As good as Cable Therapy is with creatures and a Detection Probe, it can be as bad when you don't draw the creatures when it's in the graveyard, because it is a half of a spell if you don't know your opponent's hand. And especially with Brainstorms all over, it can just backfire as it did here for Brett, unfortunately.
And Brett knowing that a 7/7 Griselbrand Flying Lifelinker is coming into play against his hand of Scalding Tarn is just going to go ahead and back things up and try and get there in game 2. But he does have the added benefit of knowing how Patrick sideboarded, so he can possibly change how he did sideboard. Although
I think we can see him maybe put in, if he's comfortable in the matchup and he's comfortable with the sideboard plan, he will just keep it as it is because he probably figured out how Patrick would sideboard in the first place. If not, he's probably going to bring in the Young Pyromancer because he's on the play, so he can be a bit more beat down faster.
It is kind of interesting. There are some interesting choices in his sideboard cards like Diabolic Edict, Pithy Needle. These cards, instead of coming in, have just kind of been relegated to the sideboard here. And And I think Brett, kind of has his mind on, one game plan. His game plan is to kind of, counter everything and, sit back on a Delver of Secrets, a Deathright, or a Pyromancer. But I don't know if I really hate having any of these cards in my deck against a Show and Tell deck.
No, but again, I think it's hard to, like, you need X amount of ways to see your opponent's hand. You need, like, the Cable Therapies, so you need some creatures as well. So eventually you will run out of opportunities to board out of your deck. Like the Gurmag Angler you could board out, but as we saw before, like you really need a clock to finish off the game. So it's hard with these tempo decks when they turn into control, because you still need a way to actually finish the game. Especially if Patrick plays like the defense grid. Like the tempo decks don't really have enough resources to fight through like a counter war through defense grid. So you really need to be able to pressure these combo decks.
Right, and that's kind of like what I'm getting at. If your opponent is boarding in defense grid, then I'm even more willing to kind of board in a card like Pithy Needle or Diabolic Edict, because you need a way to interact if defense grid is laid down and you don't have the tools to fight through. You got to be able to to beat. If he just goes ahead and Show and Tells in and Emrakul into play, that's it. The game is very likely over at that point. So I think when your opponent is boarding in a certain way, I think it should change at least a little bit how you're viewing the matchup here. And there are cards that, Pithy Needle and Diabolic Edict, obviously it's not great if your opponent has Omniscience. It's not great if your opponent has Sneak Attack. It's not great if your opponent, is sneak attacking you, obviously. But otherwise the card could be like reasonable in a lot of different spots. Your opponent just Show and Tells, puts it in Emrakul, you untap, you Diabolic Edict them. Doesn't matter if they have a defense grid in play, but it is kind of an interesting subgame that you can think about here. And Brett decided that he doesn't really want to play on those games.
But what he did want to do was to utilize that he's on the play here. So he actually boarded in the 2 Stifles that he boarded out for game 2. Right. So he's ready for Patrick's Fetchlands here with the Stifle. And unfortunately for Patrick, he has to just walk. Like, eventually he has to fetch this Scalding Tarn, and it's not going to look great for him when Brett is going to Stifle. But he's not going to do it on his own turn, because Patrick knows that he plays Stifle. So let's see if he's going to fire off a Ponder here, Brett, and dig for actually answers, or if he's just going to play Delver of Secrets. I like playing Delver of Secrets.
Yeah, I'm leaning on Delver too. Like you want a threat in play. Ponder's like fine as like Force of Will fodder, and if you don't flip your Delver, you still get to untap and cast your Ponder to fix everything. And I think at this point, Brett, it's kind of like gun shy after the last game where he didn't have any threats and didn't end up working out for him. So I'm not really surprised to see this Delver of Secrets into play. And Sneak Attack off the top is not really helping Patrick's case here. I think Patrick, kind of realizes that he has to play around Stifle because of the way his hand is. So I don't think he really wants to go ahead and push here. But we're going to see this Delver not actually flip. That's pretty unfortunate for Brett. The question is, Brett is that card that he's looking at the top of the deck something he wants to draw, or is it something he doesn't? And it looks like he does want to draw, and it is going to be a young Pyromancer here.
Yeah. I think Brett is going to Ponder. He's going to attack. And then I think he's going to Ponder to see if he can get something nice. And if not, I think he's going to try and bait Patrick to do something with Scalding Tarn with that Cable Therapy. Because having Delver this time, Cable Therapy, will actually be a live spell. So he's going to fire it off, say Force of Will, Brainstorm, or Show and Tell. And then if Patrick doesn't do anything, he's going to take the next most lethal card by sacrificing the Delver. Yeah. So he's going to say Force of Will. This is like a classic Cable Therapy card to name. Because then you have 100% free pass on the next card. So because Patrick didn't do anything, I think he's going to sacrifice Delver of Secrets and take away double Brainstorm.
Yeah, I also would not be surprised to see that either. Delver of Secrets, obviously a clock, but leaving your opponent with a Scalding Tarn they can't use, a City of Traders that is essentially useless, and a bunch of cards that they can't really cast is going to be pretty good for you. But it looks like that's not
interesting. Yeah.
It's kind of interesting. I'm really interested to see what his plan is. Yeah, I also thought, if he could have just taken show and tell, he also would have been able to just surgical it there too.
We have Mike on our side, and Mike actually just noted that he could also take show and tell and then just surgical extraction it, and that is also a 100%. It's a good play as well, because then Patrick will have a really hard time getting the omniscience. So every time he draws an omniscience, it will be like a blank for him. But again, we see Brett playing super conservative. He doesn't want to rush into anything, and he really wants to control the game. And having the Delver on the board, he thinks he's ahead here, so he's not gonna sacrifice it or anything. He wants it to flip and just finish Patrick off with the stifle. Mm-hmm. So, and I respect that, and I'm 100% sure that what Brett is doing is what he has been testing for, and how he thinks the matchup is playing out.
Yeah, I'd have to say that Brett's hand is kind of in such a way that he doesn't need to make any moves here, and a stifle is going to go ahead and flip this Delver of Secrets, and that's going to make this clock pretty damaging here, and Patrick's going to need to draw something pretty soon.
The thing is, Patrick has like a City of Traders, so Brett knows that Patrick's hand is pretty good, but he's lacking off the mana. So next time Patrick plays a land, if it's not a Lotus Petal, he will have to try and go for it. So what Patrick is doing right now is trying to build up his hand so that he can fight whatever Brett is doing. But he can only do that with X amount of counterspells. So until Patrick tries to fire or crack the Scalding Tarn, Brett is just going to sit there and pretty much do nothing with the Stifles and the Force of Will.
Yeah, so we'll see here. This is obviously an awkward spot for Patrick. He really would like to draw a basic some basic lands. Even a Volcanic Island, I think he'd take at this point. He just kind of wants anything, but instead he's just gonna move to his cleanup here, discard this Omniscience, and go ahead and pass it back to Brett. Brett's gonna go ahead and draw a young Pyromancer here, and he's at a point where he can kind of just sit around, just keep attacking with this Delver until Patrick falls over.
Yeah, the funny thing is here, like, Brett is kind of he's so much ahead on the board because Patrick needs to build up his hand. But when Patrick doesn't draw like Force of Wills to be able to counter the Stifles, the City of Traders and the Scalding Tarn are just liabilities for Patrick because he will have to do something at some point. So every land that he draws from this point will just be. It will be good, but it will also be bad. So it's actually only Force of Wills that are good for him. If not, he's just gonna go to the cleanup step for like infinite turns.
Wow.
So now he's
an island here off the top.
Yeah. So now what Patrick can do is that he can try and go for show and tell, and play around days. So if he taps Seed of Traders, plays island, cast show and tell, Brett has to like do something.
I'm actually wondering if he does have enough turns that he can maybe wait. I'm wondering if he's supposed to cast something like Cunning Wish, and just get something like Flusterstorm to protect his show and tell or something of the like.
Yeah. The thing is, if he's gonna clean up here, he's gonna clean up like Cunning Wish, which is he could do that, but I think if we start taking away like Brett's hard counters, eventually we can get back into this game because the Delver is only like it kills us in like 5 turns from now, so we actually have like a couple of turns to do something. But it's gonna be interesting which line Patrick shows here or chooses. Someone said in the chat that he could stifle the City of Traders sacrifice effect to be really nice towards Patrick.
Wow, that would be pretty helpful. I mean, Brett doesn't want to win the game too badly.
Yeah,
wants to let Patrick know maybe he'll do it just so Patrick thinks that he has the ability to fetch with his Scalding Tarn, and then Brett gets him with the second stifle. I think that's a good setup there.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's not gonna do that, but it's a possibility. So what Patrick is here, as I thought that he would try to go for something. He's going off with Cunning Wish, so he's actually playing around nicely around the surgical extraction in Brett's hand. Because if he played show and tell without counter backup and Brett just counters it, then Brett has the opportunity to just surgical extraction, and it's pretty much game over. He still has a sneak attack, but it will be hard from that point.
Definitely a lot harder.
So
one of the big lines that a lot of these decks used to take is show and tell, put in a sneak attack, activate sneak attack. Because those games are generally just game ending here. But it looks like he's going to go ahead and cast the Cunning Wish here. Cunning Wish is going to resolve. We are going to see Patrick pick up a Flusterstorm here.
So this is really what he needs, because next turn he has City of Traders, and he has the opportunity to draw an island or an additional fetch land. Fetch land would be kind of brutal, but it would suit its purpose. So he can try to build up this big turn where he forces through like a show and tell. And Brett got a pretty good... He could have drawn a land or a Death Shaman here, and I think because it's a Death Shaman, he's probably not going to play it, because he really wants to do the Stifle. But I think it's about time that he plays the Ponder to get like his third land.
Right.
But I think Patrick has played this game so well, and he's really like not been too, how do you say it? Like he's really hold his horses with the fetch land and not played into everything patient. that could punish him.
Yeah, and it looks like here that he's going to go ahead and play this Deathrite Shaman and use it for Cabal Therapy. And I think we're likely to see it hit Show and Tell here, although I wouldn't be surprised to see it hit something else. Yeah,
this I completely forgot this about the Deathrite Shaman was such a good draw, because now he's going to take Show and Tell, and then he's just going to remove everything with Surgical Extraction. So for 1 mana, he actually gets to cast an additional Cabal Therapy, which is massive in the game right now.
Yeah.
And I think Brett needs to fire off the Surgical Extraction here, just to bait Patrick into fetching his land.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, Patrick can't fetch here. He knows about the Stifle from Brett. He knows the one earlier from the reveal from
from the Delver, yeah.
Yeah, so we're likely. I think it's the best course of action is just Surgical now or Surgical on your own turn. I don't think there are really any other options. Because if you try and do it on his draw step, this Flusterstorm is just going to go ahead and eat that Surgical. You don't want to spend your mana plus a Force of Will to trade for a Flusterstorm in the Show and Tells.
Yeah, I agree.
So we'll see here what Brett's planned here. But as I said, Brett is a bit, as we've kind of talked about before, Brett is a very patient Delver player. He kind of plays all these Delver decks like a control deck. We watched him do that in his pod. We're watching him do it now, where it just kind of takes his time. Doesn't really want to kill anybody fast.
But he's thinking here. Like he's definitely evaluating what he's going to do, and he goes for the line that I would also have chosen in this spot, and it really forces Patrick into just letting it resolve. And when your opponent exiles all your Show and Tells, it's just not a good thing.
Fortunately for Patrick, that this does mean he is going to get to go ahead and resolve his fetch here with Flusterstorm play. He is going to be able to beat Stifle. That's for sure.
The first one, at least. But it's also hard to have to use your Flusterstorm against like a random Stifle from your Delver deck. But
yeah,
it is what it is.
I think he has to.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
So we'll see here. Force Will off the top is actually pretty reasonable. That's gonna give Patrick even more protection.
Yeah, it was exactly what Patrick needed for this hand to be like go from a decent hand to a good hand, even though the Show and Tells are gone in the deck. But remember, he still has like the Sneak Attack and the Emrakul in his hand, which is definitely like it's a potential just game win right there.
Yep, and it looks like he's going to go ahead and fetch here. Go ahead and Flusterstorm this Stifle. It looks like, he's fetching now because otherwise Flusterstorm is not going to be able to really counter. Might not be able to counter if Brett draws another land. So instead of taking that chance, it is possible that it's right for him to pass and on Brett's upkeep fetch to try and eat up all his mana for that turn. But if Brett has a second Stifle, then he instead just gets blown out. So Patrick's going to go ahead, play it safe, fetch. get it stifled, Flusterstorm the stifle. I like how he's getting Volcanic Island here. At this point, you really just need all the blue mana you can for your Brainstorms, your Ponders, your Preordains, and if Brett draws a Wasteland, he draws a Wasteland. At this point, you can't really sit around and wait for something to happen.
So, it seems like Patrick, he's in a spot where he can't really play around days, so he's just gonna fire everything off because now he actually got he has the space to try and build up his hand here. So he doesn't even play the City of Traders because he wants to play an island if he gets it off of the Brainstorm. Because City of Traders, as good as it is, it's a liability when it's on the board because you can't really play more lands later on in the game without losing. So what he gets here is he gets an additional Brainstorm. But as I talked about earlier, Patrick is kind of Brainstorm locked now. He knows what he's going to draw for the next couple of turns, which puts him in a situation where he needs to just try and fire off Sneak Attack next turn.
Yeah. Well, luckily he drew another Sneak Attack, so he's going to be able to spend the next 2 turns casting it. And kind of forcing here. I think with the second Volcanic Island, I think Brett's kind of priced into casting the Pyromancer here, and it looks like that is what he's going to do.
Yeah, and then he's going to keep up Stifle probably for if Patrick resolves his Sneak Attack.
Right.
I don't think Brett saw Patrick's Force of Will here.
Yeah, I think it's possible that he should actually just be pondering here because Ponder creates a token that puts 6 power on the board, and it forces Patrick to have multiple pieces. But the one thing to consider is that if he plays Sneak Attack and he does want to Force the Will, he's just dead on board anyway.
Game over, yeah. Because of the token, the Young Pyromancer will generate a token from Force the Will, and Patrick being at 6 life, Brett will have 6 power and eventually kill him.
Yep, and I think he kind of Patrick knows it since he can't actually Sneak Attack. He's better off wasting.
Yeah.
Wow. And a days off the top, I'd have to guess is gonna go ahead and wrap this up.
Yeah. It seems like what Brett didn't do in game 2 with creatures, he did in game 3. The Delver went all the way and pretty much killed. It's like a classic Canadian Threshold game, this one, even though it's Grixis Delver. It's like Stifles, Disruption, and a Delver. So
yeah, what's really unfortunate here is that Patrick could cast Cunning Wish to get Kozilek's return, and for Brett, it's basically kind of a free force.
Yeah, that's what happens when you have issues with your mana, but actually, even though the game has kind of revolved around the Stifle and the lacking of mana from Patrick's side, I think both players have played the game really well, and eventually the game has been insane. Actually, both players, we can see that both players know how to interact with each other's unknown cards and known cards for that sake. So it's just been a great match to watch and see 2 good players do well.
What's really interesting here is Brett just kind of is letting everything resolve. Cunning Wish resolved, got Kozilek's return, this Brainstorm during the end step resolved. Yeah. With Patrick at 1 life, he knows he can't Force a Will, so he's just going to have to draw everything, and it's going to have to be great here. He gets to beat Flusterstorm, he gets to beat Force a Will here, so he's just going to kind of let Patrick do whatever he wants because he knows he has him.
Yeah, someone states that it's a classic Delver. It's probably more classic Delver than classic Canadian Threshold.
Yeah.
But it's pretty nice having your opponent at 1 life when you know he has a Force of Will. So let's see. Patrick is taking his last out, and Brett is probably gonna Force of Will and extend the hand here.
Yeah, I think Patrick should at the very least Force of Will the Kozilek's return. Don't let your opponent beat you. Only you can beat you.
Yeah, so just take the knee.
Yeah, so we're going to see Grixis Delver is going to move on 2-1
against me.
Sneak here, and you get to play against Grixis Delver. Michael Bonde, how do you feel as Death and Taxes against Grixis Delver?
I think it's depending on Brett's like sideboard. I think.
Oh, he has a nice sideboard.
Yeah, but I think it's a good matchup for Death and Taxes. But I'm pretty confident in the matchup at least.
Do you think? What do you think is going to be the bigger blowout? When he casts Dread of Night or when he electric you?
Yeah, let's make the game decide that one. But I guess we are getting new decks, like it's a best out of 5. So, but I actually don't know how it exactly works. But if
it'll definitely be a lot of fun. I'm really pretty interested. You do get 3 deck lists, so it'll be pretty interested to see what happens. But we do get to see Brett win the wild card round. Over Patrick.
Congratulations to Brett.
He's going to move on. He's going to play you in top 8. We're about to have a second match. The second match is going to be Anurag Nas playing some terrible Tundra strategy with random cards that he threw in. I assume he has multiple predicts because he loves that card. And against Jarvis Yu played lands. And Jarvis Yu is a master with lands. He did win a Grand Prix with lands. So we're gonna get to see a pretty interesting matchup here. And I was right. I knew it. He has 4 predict. I knew it.
Yeah. So I think I'm gonna commentate with Julian or with with Julian. I think so. Rudy, it has been a pleasure, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in Vegas.
Yes. When do you get in?
Tuesday, I think.
Okay, I get in Monday. We'll have to get drinks or something.
Yeah, definitely, and play some Legacy games.
Yes.
So see you in the commentator booth next week or the week after, or else in Vegas.
Yep, sounds good.
See you, friend.
See you.